9:36 is the time. Your friend Jeff Angelo is on the radio, News Radio 1040 WHO radio to be exact. Thanks very much for joining me on this fine Friday. Well, we often talk about the implications of social media in our lives. And here's a sinister use of social media. You got your high school senior, and they're trying to get into a college, and it's very competitive to get into a college. High school seniors are using social media to rat out their classmates on inappropriate behavior in an attempt to try to ruin their chances of getting into a college. Here to discuss this with me on the WHO Radio Newsline is certified educational consultant Catherine Mars. Catherine, welcome back to the program. And wow, good morning.
Good morning to you too.
So
I think the biggest...
Yeah, go ahead. What is going on out there?
Well, I think the biggest lesson is that when kids get accepted into college, they need to keep it to themselves, not brag about it.
Right.
Because there may be classmates that have been waitlisted or rejected from those schools that this particular student got into, and therefore might be sour grapes. And so the best way to kind of prevent anything like that happening is not to give them any ammunition to do it.
So how is this working? Students, are they actually scouring the social media of kids they think they're competing against to get into these schools?
Well,
how does this work?
I hope not. I really do. I think that, the lesson is that if students go to a smaller high school where the ability to get more than one or two or three students from that school into certain colleges, they need to be sensitive to not sharing where they're applying.
Right.
Because maybe the other students hadn't thought about those schools or something. And therefore, it gives them a better chance of getting in. So I think at smaller schools, it's probably more prevalent, if it is prevalent, than it is at larger high schools. And I don't know that kids are really scouring the social media sites to find dirt on students. I think that it's kind of I think the Harvard situation brought it to a head or brought it to the attention, but I don't know that it's really that prevalent.
So let me ask you, have we set up some kind of environment, Catherine, and you brought up the Harvard situation. That's where it was brought to the attention of Harvard that kids that have been accepted into Harvard were engaged in offensive humor online, and it got pointed out to Harvard, and Harvard said, well, we're de-inviting you to attend our university.
Right.
And so you think that possibly that information was provided to them by a student that said, hopefully now the spot will open up for me. So how have we set ourselves up in this environment where kids can be so, make it such a blood sport, if you will, to try to get into college?
Well, I think if you look at our society as a whole over the last 20 years, longer probably, but at least the last 20 years, and you look at television shows and movies and video games, the moral values or the mores of our society are deteriorating. They're not what they were in the 60s, the 50s, and the 70s even. So if you look at things like the Brady Bunch, well, a show like that couldn't exist today on TV.
It's too bland.
It was clean.
Right.
It didn't have a lot of bad language, and it certainly didn't have a lot of immoral or amoral type of messaging.
Well,
and I think in today's, like if you look at the different shows on, I can't even think right now, on some of HBO, et cetera. Some of them are really, really cutthroat.
Right. You're Catherine, you're raising such a great point because I've got a granddaughter, and she's often saying, here's what I'm watching on pick a channel like Nick at Night or what have you. And you're right. It almost always has to do with relational conflict. People being cutthroat with each other, being mean to each other. They're really absorbing a lot of that. And I guess it starts to normalize like, well, it's a dog-eat-dog world eventually.
Right. I mean, both parents work in many families, so they don't have a lot of role modeling at home. And so, and they're not reading necessarily the classics. They're reading whatever popular fiction is out there. And so it's just a whole different world. And then you look at our Congress, and the
Yes.
way our government is run, and just, I mean, the current situation with the way our president tweets. And I'm sorry, where are the messages? What are the messages? Well, they certainly aren't to respect one another necessarily. And so I think it's really an overall view what's happening in our society.
Let me ask you then, Catherine, because you are an educational consultant, even in this dog-eat-dog world, what's the right way to go about it? I want my kid to get into Harvard. I want my kid to get into a good school. What's the right way to go about it?
Well, number one, they need to, starting in ninth grade, do very well in school, but also have some extracurricular activities where they can demonstrate leadership. And then throughout high school, they keep a very clean profile. They don't post things on social media that could be compromising.
Right.
Or could send the wrong message. So that by the time they apply to college, they have a very nice academic record and a very nice record of leadership. And then when they apply, if there is any indication that something is not quite right, they explain themselves so that there's no second guessing on the part of the admissions office. You know, admissions office wants to accept everybody, even Harvard, even though they can't. And so what happens is that if there is anything that's not clearly understood, such as, a semester during high school where their grades plummeted, if they don't explain what happened, then the admissions office is going to make their own assumptions, and they may not be positive. And so just being honest, being open and honest is what teenagers need to do on their college applications.
And I would imagine, Catherine, one of the issues that you're facing is that it's cool to put yourself on social media acting up. But even if you've got a privacy filter set and you think, only my friends can see this or what have you, you're going to get surprised if that eventually bubbles up when you're trying to compete with other kids to get into a school.
Absolutely. Nothing is private and nothing is temporary. So they need to really think twice before they post something because it's going to be there forever. And somebody with some savvy with technology can find it.
And so you would say that when a college admission board is looking over application and they're looking at the extracurricular activities, they're looking at grades, character still matters to a admissions board.
Absolutely, because they're trying to build a community of kids. And they want a good community. They don't want kids that are going to be a problem. They don't want kids that are going to be on either academic probation or socially kicked out. They want kids that are going to be leaders and are going to be responsible citizens and be kind to each other. So you think about all the date rape that goes on on college campuses. Well, I mean, they don't want kids like that.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you, so if you've put something out there, you talked about earlier having an explanation, and you're right. Like, for example, if somebody says, your grades dipped over this year, and can you give us an explanation? If you've got something out there on social media and you're regretting it, should you be prepared to offer an explanation, be upfront about what was on social media? Do you just react to whatever you're being asked about?
Well, I think that students, I don't think they need to draw attention to their social media because colleges, frankly, do not have time to go searching different Facebook pages, et cetera, unless there's a red flag on the application.
Gotcha.
So students who have done something that they now regret that might be out there on social media, I mean, they can possibly write an essay talking about, that when they were 15, their maturity level was not great and that they've learned a lot and have grown up a lot since then. They don't have to address that, on Facebook I posted blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They don't have to be specific, but they do need to let colleges know that if there were things that could leave a trail of them out there, that they need to let the colleges know that, hey, I wasn't terribly mature, but now in reflection, I've grown up a whole lot. I'm ready for college, and I'm ready to handle, what's ahead.
Let me ask you, Catherine, as a person that's advising families right now as they try to begin that journey toward college, what's the most drastic change that you've observed? What's the biggest challenge that a young person faces today trying to get into college that they may not have faced generation ago. Is it this kind of social media presence, or what do you think?
Well, I think that there's two things going on. Number one, there's a great deal more selectivity, and it's not necessarily because colleges have become more selective. It's the fact there's more kids applying to college. So that makes college more selective just because they have a bigger volume and they can be more picky. So that's one side of it. And the other side of it is that kids really do need to pay attention from the time they enter high school about, how things are going to look. And how they behave, how they take their classes and their grades. Teachers in 11th grade are going to be writing their recommendation letters. If they've been someone who's been, shooting spitballs or whatever in class and not participating and being a constant problem, that's going to be a problem when they need a recommendation to write for college.
Catherine, it is always fascinating to talk to you. I certainly appreciate your insight on this. Certified educational consultant Catherine Mars. We'll talk to you, I'm sure, again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. You can reach me at www.marscaa.com.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Coming up next, we'll return.